In a time long past, humans and spirits lived in the same world, yet they did not interact, coexisting in a quiet peace. However, that peace was shattered one day when a malevolent monster appeared, attacking humans and spirits alike. The spirits, possessing great power but gentle hearts, were unable to fight back. Amidst their despair, a single young girl stood up to face the threat. She pleaded with the Spirit King, begging him to defeat the monster and offering to take all the pain and suffering upon herself. Moved by her words, the Spirit King resolved to vanquish the beast. But by the time he turned back to her, her body and soul were already in tatters. The monster had been defeated at a terrible cost. To reward her courage, the Spirit King promised to lend his power to her lineage from that day forward. As a sign of their pact, he bestowed a mark upon her wrist. This was the beginning of the legend of the Spirit King and the Saint. A young Lisette smiled, remembering the story. She had always thought it was just a fairy tale her parents told her. The memory shifts to a later time, where Crown Prince Geoffrey holds an older Lisette, whispering that he had always wanted to do this, calling her by name. Lisette, the saint of this generation. Her eyes widened in shock. The idea that a day would come when she could meet the Spirit King had always felt like a distant dream. Her thoughts drift back further to when she was 7 years old. That was the year she was separated from her parents and brought to the ducal house in the capital. There, she stood before Duke Treville. He looked down at her and commanded, "Lisette, show me your right arm again." The young girl could only offer a timid reply. He had brought her to his ducal home for one reason. She possessed the mark of the pact, the sign that she was born into this country as the saint. The bearer of this mark, revered for its preciousness, was said to be able to wield the power of the spirits, be it wood, water, fire, or earth, according to their own affinity. The Duke observed that the mark had not yet appeared on her, musing aloud that perhaps Lisette was a reincarnation of the saint before trailing off thoughtfully. His expression then twisted into a cunning grin as he leaned in and asked her directly what kind of power she could use. Lisette admitted she couldn't use any power at all. The Duke's demeanor softened as he took her hands, reassuring her that she was still young and that the power belonged to the spirits anyway. He promised that one day, she would wield a power greater than anyone else's. His words gave her hope. Looking up at him, she thought that if she could just get used to things, she could surely become a good older sister. That fragile hope was instantly shattered. A sudden, cold splash of water struck her full in the face, the shock of it making her gasp. She had been so happy to have a new sister. Dripping and stunned, she looked up to see Soline Treville, age 8. The girl stared down with contempt, a cruel smile on her face, and commanded the filthy commoner to address her as Mistress Soline. As Lisette knelt on the floor, humiliated, the Duke explained that Soline had an affinity for water spirits. He then urged Lisette to prove herself a worthy older sister and retaliate, but she could only plead for them to stop, insisting she had no power. Her pleas were ignored. Flanked by tiny water spirits, Soline claimed the spirits were saddened and didn't want her to do this anymore. She then turned her malicious gaze back to Lisette, who could only stare in horror as a small spirit hovered menacingly before her. She could feel the water spirits' distress as they swirled around her. They found it painful to be commanded to hurt someone, and they could see how much she was suffering under their assault. Despite her own terror, she offered a gentle smile, trying to reassure the tiny beings that she was all right. Her compassion, however, only earned a look of pure disgust from Soline, who found the display utterly repulsive. The girl whirled around to face her father, Duke Treville, her voice rising to a shrill cry. She accused Lisette of being a liar, claiming she was using spirit powers that were invisible to others. Soline shrieked that she hated having someone like that for a sister. Her words struck Lisette with the force of a physical blow, leaving her wide-eyed and confused. Overhearing his daughter's outburst, the Duke mused that the rare affliction Lisette possessed was something even the royal family coveted. She struggled to comprehend the weight of his statement, whispering the words, "the royal family," to herself as a chilling realization began to dawn. 5 years passed. On the day of Lisette's 12th birthday, events were set in motion within the royal castle. There, Duke Treville formally presented his stepdaughter to Crown Prince Geoffrey. With a deep bow, he announced that this was Lisette, the very one who possessed the rare affliction they sought. Now a young woman of 14, Lisette stood silently, her expression empty. He looked down at her, his face a mask of contempt. He questioned if this plain, unimpressive girl was truly his fiancée, then bluntly declared his hatred for the idea. Though the Duke attempted to remind him that the arrangement was the king's decision, the prince's disgust was palpable. His cruel words echoed in her ears. A fiancé? Her? She glanced towards Soline, only to be met with a venomous, triumphant glare. It was known that Crown Prince Geoffrey commanded 2 powerful spirit familiars, fire and wind. Leaning menacingly close to Lisette, he whispered a challenge for her to show him her power, adding with a smirk that he would burn any living flower that dared to exist in his presence. As if to punctuate his threat, a torrent of flame erupted behind him. He began his torment not with fire, but with a flick of his wrist. The wind spirit under his command answered instantly, lifting the tea from its cup and twisting it into a menacing, liquid serpent. He addressed her formally as he watched the chaos unfold across the tea table, a ruin of spilled drinks and shattered porcelain. Across from them, Soline observed the spectacle with undisguised glee. Finding the situation amusing, He proposed a contest between his fire spirit and whatever power she possessed. Soline, thrilled by the idea, immediately accepted on her sister's behalf. Lisette could only protest, begging him to wait and not to use the spirit's power for such a thing. Her stepsister, however, offered no support, instead silencing her with a sharp command to be quiet. The command left Lisette frozen, her eyes wide with terror. She recalled the warnings. The people of the capital were not to be trifled with, especially adults who could wield such power. She was utterly helpless. The realization crushed her spirit. Tears streamed down her face as she wondered why she was being tormented so casually. The misery of being unable to help herself was overwhelming. But in her moment of despair, a familiar comfort arrived. A massive white wolf gently licked the tears from her cheek. She whispered his name, Jade. The great wolf continued to nuzzle her, and she wondered aloud why he was comforting her, perhaps because she couldn't see his true form. This was the same wolf that had appeared half a year prior, captured and hostile. Now, however, he stood as one of her most precious allies, just like the tiny spirits who fluttered around them. With a gentle smile, Lisette spoke to the great white wolf beside her. She told Jade that this was her favorite scene, the moment the saint appeared before the Spirit King. She then embraced him, her cheek pressed against his soft fur. She remarked that his eyes were the same beautiful, jewel-like color as the Spirit King's. In a soft voice, Jade simply spoke her name, Lisette. This moment of peace brought back a painful memory of her parents. They had told her to grow up to be a strong and kind saint, and above all, to be happy. She still didn't know where they were now. A small spirit tried to comfort her, but the memory was sharp. The condition for her adoption was that she would never be allowed to see them again. Despite the ache of this memory, she resolved to be like the saint, who could smile even in times of sorrow. Her quiet strength was apparent to the small spirit, who remarked on how radiant she was. Lisette gazed forward, thinking of the day she would finally be free. This thought of freedom was tied to her lost parents. She confessed to the spirits that she wished she could go look for them, but quickly warned them not to do anything reckless on her behalf. She continued to endure her circumstances, and several years passed. Finally, the day she had been waiting for arrived. The day was Crown Prince Geoffrey's 19th birthday celebration. But it was not a day of joy for her. The prince, holding Soline close, loudly declared, Lisette Treville. No, Lisette Luguet. I hereby annul my engagement to you. His words struck her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her utterly stunned. Her eyes widened in disbelief as the prince looked down on her with a cold, dismissive gaze. He continued his public announcement, questioning why she was even considered part of the Treville family. Beside him, Soline smirked. Lisette could only think of the 10 years she had spent as their adopted daughter. She stood with her head bowed as the king finally addressed her. After a long wait, he declared her useless for failing to wield her power, dismissing her as a stepdaughter. He accepted the judgment against her, proclaiming that her crime was worthy of death. Confused by the sudden verdict, she asked what crime she had committed. Prince Geoffrey, holding Soline close, explained the charge. She was accused of forging the proof of engagement and forcing her way into the ducal family as his betrothed. A cruel smirk spread across his face as he added that her unforgivable sin was tormenting his beloved Soline. The king's judgment then rang out, sentencing her to exile in the land of Arctid, a fate the onlookers whispered was worse than death. As Lisette stared in shock, a massive white paw suddenly stepped into view, startling Duke Treville, who demanded to know who dared to interrupt. The intruder was revealed to be a giant white wolf. Lisette's eyes widened in stunned recognition as she breathed its name. The wolf's intelligent eyes locked onto hers, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Soline recoiled in disgust, complaining that the wolf, Jade, was always glaring at her and questioning why the king would permit such a beast in the palace. As she cowered behind the prince, Lisette rushed to the wolf's defense, insisting that Jade would never cause harm. He looked on with a malicious grin, the sigil on his hand beginning to glow as he clenched his fist. The beast, he declared, required discipline. In response, a torrent of wind and fire erupted from his hand. Lisette cried out Jade's name and threw herself over the wolf to shield him from the blast. Around them, tiny spirits were caught in a maelstrom, wailing in agony. The flames died down, leaving her kneeling on the ground, surprisingly unharmed. A dark-haired figure with small horns materialized before her, looking down with concern and asking if she felt the heat. Lisette could only stare up in confusion. She found herself held in the arms of a stranger, a handsome man with light hair and markings on his forehead. He looks down at her with a gentle expression, speaking her name softly, Lisette. He smiles, a stark contrast to the scene behind him where Prince Geoffrey fumes, demanding to know why his fire magic has failed. Beside the prince, Soline stares, momentarily captivated by the newcomer's appearance. Lisette gazes into his eyes, which seem to glitter like gemstones. A strange feeling washes over her. Though she is certain she has never heard his voice before, it feels deeply familiar. The nostalgic sensation intensifies, as if a latent power deep within her is being drawn to the surface. As he continues to hold her securely, she whispers a name in disbelief, Jade. He affirms her guess with a quiet, yes, adding that this is something he has long wished to do. Surrounded by tiny, joyful spirits, Lisette's face flushes as she struggles to understand. Is it really you, Jade? How? She asks. The spirits chirp happily, noting that the fire spirits seem pleased, as if they've been freed from something. At that moment, Lisette realizes her intuition had been right all along. Her mind races to a new conclusion. Looking up at him with wide, questioning eyes, she asks, "But Jade is the Spirit King?" He confirms it without hesitation. "That's right," he says, his gaze steady. "And you, Lisette, are the saintess of this era." His declaration echoes through the hall, causing an uproar. "The Spirit King and the saintess?" the crowd murmurs. Prince Jeffrey erupts in fury, shouting that it's a lie and an act of profound disrespect. Ignoring the prince's outburst, Jade pulls Lisette closer and announces to all that his engagement is therefore void. Lisette, he declares, is free. She looks up at him, her expression a mixture of shock and dawning realization. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief as a blush warmed her cheeks. The word echoed in her mind. Freedom. Still processing the reality of it, she asked if it was truly for her. The Spirit King, holding her gently, smiled down with warmth. He then asked what she wanted to do, promising that he would grant whatever wish she made. The king stares in disbelief, his mind reeling. He questions how a wolf could have transformed into a man, wondering aloud if this could be the legendary Spirit King. In the background, the man who was once the great wolf Jade holds Lisette in his arms. She looks up at her protector, her face flushed and her eyes wide with astonishment. Held securely in his arms, she is completely captivated by the handsome man before her. He gazes down at her, a gentle, knowing smile gracing his lips as he begins to speak her name. Leaning closer, he softly asks her to make another wish, his voice calm and reassuring amidst the unfolding chaos. Her mind races. She wants to plead with him, but a sense of finality washes over her. The charade, she realizes, is over. The scene shifts, and Lisette finds herself facing Soline and Prince Jeffrey. Soline speaks with contempt, questioning the so-called proof of the contract, and mocking the idea of a saintess who cannot even use the power of spirits. Soline's expression twists into a vicious sneer as she calls Lisette a liar. Lisette, stunned, can only stammer a denial. Beside Soline, Prince Jeffrey erupts in anger, shouting at Lisette for allowing herself to be deceived yet again. He continues, his tone laced with a strange pity, telling her not to be swayed by such a pathetic girl. But Soline cuts him off, pointing a commanding finger at Lisette. She roars that the true saintess, the one with the power of water, is herself. She declares that Lisette is nothing but a lowborn commoner. The word lowborn strikes Lisette like a physical blow. Her eye widens in pure, unadulterated shock. The king's voice cuts through the tension. He calmly informs Jeffrey that while Lisette ought to be executed, allowing her to be merely exiled would be an act of mercy on Soline's behalf, and a favor to Duke Treville. Soline watches Lisette, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. She concedes that Lisette might indeed be the legendary saintess, but her only desire was to drive the girl, whom she considered an eyesore, into the land of demons. Her smile widens with cruel satisfaction as she thinks that Lisette will finally be gone. She inwardly commands the girl to cry pathetically for her. At that moment, the sky outside the castle darkens, and massive bolts of lightning crash down upon the spires. The sudden, violent storm throws the royal court into a panic. Soline lets out a terrified scream, while Crown Prince Jeffrey stares in wide-eyed shock at the chaos. Amid the commotion, Lisette looks up, wondering at the thunder that makes the sky as dark as night. Beside her, Jade's expression is grim. He recognizes the phenomenon at once as the power of the Spirit King, and realizes with cold certainty that it is directed at Lisette. He seizes her wrist, his voice low and intense. He declares that he will not forgive this transgression. Startled, Lisette pleads with him, calling his name and begging him to stop. She looks at him not with fear, but with a gentle, reassuring smile, telling him that she is not being blamed. A memory of her parents surfaces, their pride in her, their wish for her to always be strong and kind, and her final request, to return the sky to how it should be. Looking into his eyes, she asks softly if that is his wish as well. Jade's stern expression softens, and he closes his eyes, a faint, accepting smile gracing his lips. In response to their accord, a tiny, winged spirit materializes from the air, floating gently downwards towards an outstretched hand. The little being comes to rest delicately upon the tip of Jade's finger, a silent pact fulfilled. In an instant, a brilliant column of light erupts around Jade and Lisette, his arm raised to the heavens. Below them, Crown Prince Jeffrey and Soline can only stare, their faces etched with pure, uncomprehending shock at the divine power before them. On the balcony, the king stares in utter disbelief as the storm clouds dissipate and the sky returns to its natural state. He sweats, overwhelmed by the sheer power he has just witnessed, murmuring that it can only be a miracle. The thought crosses his mind. Could Lisette truly be a saint? Was his judgment too hasty? His son, Crown Prince Jeffrey, watches with a calm, unreadable expression as Lisette and Jade float serenely in the air. A memory surfaces of Lisette's parents entrusting her to him, asking that he and the spirits protect her. He had solemnly agreed to their request. In the present, Lisette clings to Jade, now in his massive wolf form, and pleads with him to take her away from this place, a cage where she has suffered for so long. In response, Jade lets out a resounding roar, shaking the very foundations of the castle as he prepares to depart. They ascend into the sky, surrounded by a shower of ethereal blossoms. Lisette looks up at her protector with wide, hopeful eyes. From the ground, the king and his court can only watch in awe, one nobleman realizing the truth. This is the divine blessing of the Spirit King himself. Soaring high above the capital, Jade turns to Lisette and asks if she is cold. She smiles gently, explaining that the wind spirits are adjusting the air around her to keep her warm. Surrounded by her tiny, loyal companions, she gazes down at the world she is leaving behind. She rests her cheek against his soft fur, closing her eyes with a look of pure contentment. For the first time in a long while, she feels completely safe, certain that everything will be fine as long as she is with Jade. The feeling triggers a cascade of memories. Her mind flashes back to 3 years prior, shortly after she arrived at the ducal house. She's sprawled on the floor, having been pushed down. Solene and the severe noblewoman loom over her, mocking her for not being able to walk straight, derisively calling her a beast. The memory continues, a close view of her younger self, hair soaked and clinging to her face, her eyes filled with a profound and silent sorrow from the constant torment. Yet even in those dark times, she was never truly alone. The spirits would always come to her, wiping away her tears. She would force a smile for their sake, telling them not to worry, insisting that it wasn't their fault. Remembering their unwavering kindness, she closes her eyes, a gentle, grateful smile forming on her lips. She recalls asking why they cared for her so, and silently thanks them for their constant, precious support. She recalled a memory, a moment from her past where a faint, tearful smile broke through her despair. It was a time when she had reached her limit, wishing only for freedom. The memory was tainted by her stepfather's furious voice, demanding to know how an intruder had gotten into the garden and calling her a fool for not noticing. His face twisted in rage, he had bellowed a simple, chilling order to his men. Kill it, and do it quickly. The target of his command was a large white wolf, cornered by guards with drawn swords near carriage. The beast snarled, baring its teeth in defiance. Its eyes burned with a fierce and profound intelligence, far beyond that of a common animal. The sight left the young Lisette breathless. She saw not a monster, but a creature of breathtaking beauty. Without a second thought, she ran forward, placing herself between the wolf and the guards. She pleaded with her stepfather, insisting the creature was not a threat and begging him not to have it killed. Her eyes then caught sight of a wound on the wolf's neck. She realized with a pang of sympathy that it was injured and couldn't possibly have harmed anyone. As if in gratitude, the wolf gently licked her hand. The Duke's voice called out, asking if this was acceptable to her. Lisette looked up, confused by his question. The wolf then conveyed a thought directly into her mind, explaining that it was no ordinary animal, but a sacred beast sent by the spirits. She recalled her stepfather's cold voice demanding proof regarding the wolf. Her mind raced with the thought that a creature of the mountains should have no reason to suddenly appear in a place like this. He had leaned in with a malicious grin, explaining that if he were to take the sacred beast, the ducal house would have no one to answer to. He resolved internally that he would never allow the wolf to remain by her side. But the memory of his threats faded. From the very day she and Jade had met, he had been the unwavering support of her heart. Jade's warmth brought her a sense of security that nothing else could provide. It was for this reason that she always slept beside him in her bed. A sudden thought jolted her awake. Her eyes flew open to the image of Jade in his human form, and the realization struck her. She had been sleeping with him. The memory made her flinch, finding herself now sitting atop Jade's massive wolf form. A voice echoed directly in her mind. Lisette, can you hear me? She stammered an affirmative, though her thoughts screamed in denial. Her lips parted slightly as she struggled to process the impossible. Her mind reeled, a whirlwind of confusion and embarrassment. Her eyes widened in shock as the full weight of the memory and the telepathic voice crashed down upon her. Still processing the voice in her head, she tries to make sense of a new, distant sound, wondering aloud if it is some kind of cry. Jade's voice answers in her mind, directing her attention toward a mountain range. He confirms the sound originates from beyond the peaks, noting ominously that it sounds both like a large crowd and a single, powerful entity. The source of that terrible sound is then revealed. A colossal, bear-like beast, wreathed in shadow and flame, lets out a deafening roar of pure agony. The sheer scale of the creature and its suffering raises a single, terrifying question. What could it possibly be? As they race across a desolate landscape, Jade explains the nature of their surroundings to Lisette. The dark, swirling mist is a miasma, an aggregation of malevolent demons. He clarifies that the wall-like barrier they see is the border of the kingdom, which is being held back by shrine maidens borrowing the power of the spirits. This border protects the Fia-Square kingdom on all 4 sides. Beyond it lies the land known as Arctid, the wasteland of death. As they soar through the sky, Jade remarks on the oppressive weight of the air. She reflects on how she was chased here all alone, realizing that without Jade, her strength would have surely failed her at the border. Her thoughts are interrupted as she hears voices drawing nearer. Her eyes widen in horror. Below them, a village is engulfed in flames. She spots people, villagers shouting defiantly, forming a desperate line to prevent something from advancing. The source of their terror is revealed, a massive demonic beast. Lisette recognizes it as a mammon and urgently tells Jade to let her down, questioning what he intends to do. Her expression hardens with resolve. She declares that they must buy time for the villagers to escape, instructing Jade to flee immediately after she dismounts. He looks down at her, listening to her pleas. After a moment of consideration, he agrees, but only if she promises not to act recklessly. His gaze shifts to the desperate villagers below. He then tells her that she must ask more of him. He sets her down gently on the ground. She looks up as he turns to face the burning village, placing himself between her and the chaos. She stood firm as Jade stepped forward, his powerful white paws pressing into the scorched earth. His advance was met by a deafening roar from the beast. Before it, a group of villagers recoiled in terror. One man cried out at the sight of the giant wolf, while another identified it as yet another monster, noting that someone was riding it. While their fear was directed at Jade, Lizette's attention was fixed on the unnatural blue flames engulfing a nearby building. She realized this was no ordinary fire, and looking at Jade, a dreadful possibility began to form in her mind. She considered that the creature might have once been a fire spirit. The beast's face, framed by a mane of ethereal flames, was a mask of sorrow, with tears streaming from its glowing eyes. Her eyes widened at the sight. The monster was crying. In that moment, she knew she had to help it. Turning to the terrified villagers, she announced that she would try to speak with the creature and urged them all to flee. A man, his face pale with fear, questioned her plan, asking how and where they could possibly escape. His despair was palpable. They had only just managed to build this village, and now they were being told they could not survive if they stayed. Lisette understood their plight, but her resolve hardened. She declared that if they remained, they would all burn to death. She insisted they take the children and get away from the flames. Her words spurred them into action. The men grabbed the children, shouting for everyone to run as they began a frantic evacuation. As the villagers fled, a young man with glasses watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. He observed Lisette, thinking to himself that it seemed impossible to have a proper conversation with that creature. In the moments before the confrontation, Lisette embraces Jade's human form, her voice earnest. She tells him that she will say it as many times as it takes, pleading with him to rely on her more. His expression is grim as he looks down, his resolve hardening. He states simply that he will be the one to end the creature's life. Her eyes widen slightly, but her gaze remains steady. With a quiet breath, she accepts his decision, murmuring that she understands. With their pact made, Lisette stands before the raging mammon. She acknowledges that for the Spirit King, destroying it would be easy, but that is precisely why she cannot allow it. Speaking to the beast, she expresses her respect and asks to hear its story, noting how painful its current form appears to be. The creature's fury melts into sorrow. Tears stream from its eyes as it whispers an apology, lamenting a promise that humans have long forgotten. The sentiment resonates with Lisette. She understands its desire, for she has felt the same way. In response to its pain, she opens her arms wide in a gesture of complete acceptance. She invites the mammon to cast all its sadness and suffering upon her, promising to take it on as her own. The beast lets out a low, guttural growl. Lisette remains resolute, convinced that this is the only thing she can do in this moment. With a final, deafening roar, the mammon lunges, engulfing Lisette entirely in a violent torrent of fire. From a distance, Jade screams her name in pure terror. The evacuated villagers watch the inferno from afar, their faces masks of horror. They cry out in panic, realizing the young woman has been swallowed by the very flames she sought to quell. But as the blaze dies down, it does not leave ash. Instead, a cascade of pure white feathers begins to drift gently from the sky, leaving the villagers staring in stunned, silent awe at the impossible transformation. Her compassionate act had an immediate effect. The monstrous maw, once a source of terror, now lay placid, its sharp fangs no longer a threat as it let out a soft, rumbling breath. The creature, once a being of pure malice, was now a magnificent white lion, resting peacefully. She lay against its warm flank, her own form unharmed by the purifying transformation. She looked down from her perch with a gentle, serene smile. Below, the villagers who had fled in terror now stared up in stunned silence, their eyes wide with disbelief and awe. A young girl, her voice trembling with reverence, was the first to speak the word that echoed in everyone's mind, Saintess. Her parents looked on, relief washing over their faces as they realized the danger had truly passed. From a distance, Jade and his companion watched the scene unfold. The villagers' collective realization rippled through the crowd. The Saintess had saved them. The great white lion nuzzled against Lisette, a gesture of pure affection. As she processed the villagers' words, tiny spirits began to flutter around her face. One chirped excitedly that the Saintess had saved everyone. Startled, Lisette stammered that she was nothing of the sort. She fell silent, her eyes wide with confusion. The spirit's words, their very presence, so close, left her momentarily speechless. Their joy was palpable. 3 of the small beings beamed at her, expressing how happy they were that she was with them. Lisette could only stare back, a thought beginning to form. They swarmed closer, their tiny voices overlapping with excitement. They asked if she could hear them, truly hear their voices. The question struck her with the force of a physical blow. Tears welled in her eyes as the truth dawned on her. I can't hear you, she thought, her heart overwhelmed. I can hear you so clearly. For so long, she had only been able to see the spirits, but now, their voices were as clear as day. She looks up, bewildered by the aftermath of the battle, questioning the events that just transpired. Purification, she murmurs to herself, her eyes wide with disbelief. Did I do that? He gazes down at her, a gentle, knowing smile gracing his lips. He confirms that she has awakened as a saintess, then asks if she has yet to realize it herself. She remains utterly confused, shaking her head. She confesses that she doesn't understand. She was simply lost in a desperate, frantic effort to stop the overwhelming flames. From nearby, his cloaked companion lowers his head slightly, murmuring his gratitude to Jade for believing in her. The man's voice cuts through her confusion, addressing her directly. Saintess Lisette. The title hits her with the force of a physical blow, her eyes widening in shock. That name ripples through the assembled villagers, who begin to whisper it amongst themselves in awe. A tiny spirit flits by, confirming to the others that Jade himself declared her to be the true saintess. Surrounded by a host of joyful spirits, she tentatively reaches out to stroke the head of the massive, purified beast. It leans into her touch, purring deeply as the spirits proclaim that their presence is all the proof needed of her status. The villagers watch the scene, utterly dumbfounded. One remarks that the fearsome monster is now acting like a cat, while another recalls the other strange creature present, the large white wolf. Suddenly, Jade pulls her back, shielding her with his body. He glares past the creature, his voice sharp and commanding as he warns the Fire Lord to stay away from Lisette. His warning is met with an amused smile from a new arrival. The man declares that he has taken a liking to this era's saintess, before revealing his identity with a confident flourish, the Lord of the Fire Spirits. In the village street, a man with spectacles watches with alarm, noting the presence of the monsters. In the center of the commotion, Lisette stands before a tall man with long, dark red hair. She looks up at him, her eyes wide with recognition, and identifies him as the leader of the Fire Spirits. He meets her gaze with a faint, knowing smile. He acknowledges his own description, hair like burning flames and sharp, golden eyes, and remarks that he never thought he would be called upon again. As he takes a step forward, a nearby villager flinches away in fear. He continues until he is before Lisette and Jade, where he drops to one knee. He addresses Jade as the Great Spirit King and asks that punishment be brought upon his body. He confesses that he was unwittingly ensnared by a contract, which led him to become complicit with the humans. Jade listens to the confession, his expression unreadable. He asks the Spirit Lord if he is truly prepared to accept any punishment. The Lord closes his eyes and affirms his resolve. His resolve is met with an unexpected interruption. Lisette tugs firmly on Jade's cloak, declaring that her saintess will not permit such a thing. The Lord of the Fire Spirits looks up, his eyes wide with surprise. She looks up at Jade, her face flushed and tears welling in her eyes, and pleads for them to listen to her. She wants to become a source of strength. The Lord of the Fire Spirits observes her impassioned plea. He thinks to himself that before she can do that, they must first extinguish the remaining embers of the current conflict. He addresses Lisette with reverence, proclaiming that all this is the work of the saintess. Below them, the villagers stare in disbelief at their extinguished homes, marveling that the fire vanished completely without a drop of water. She then asks him if it is possible to restore what has been burned. The Lord of the Fire Spirits looks away, admitting that unfortunately, it is impossible. His expression darkens with regret as he concedes that he has done something truly unforgivable. Lisette takes in his words, her own expression hardening with resolve as a small spirit flutters beside her. Meanwhile, the nearby villagers murmur amongst themselves, deciding they should go and inform the others of the situation. To the Fire Spirit Lord's astonishment, the villagers approach not with anger, but with gratitude for extinguishing the flames. They tell him that no one was seriously hurt, and though their homes are gone, they can camp out. They even offer to help him find any usable materials left in the wreckage. He looks down, his gaze falling upon Lisette as a realization dawns on him. Not all humans are evil. Just then, Jade appears, placing a gentle hand on Lisette's shoulder. He addresses the Fire Spirit Lord, confessing that meeting Lisette has led him to the very same conclusion. The Spirit Lord looks up, startled, and addresses him as king. At his words, Lisette's eyes widen, shimmering with emotion as she gazes up at Jade. The Lord of the Fire Spirits becomes flustered, telling Jade he is far too kind and composed, insisting that he isn't just flattering him, it's the truth. Beside them, Lisette shyly agrees. He leans in close to Lisette, his expression intense as he makes a direct request of her. He explains that her brazenness has left him flustered and that he wants her to give him a name, just as she did for the Spirit King. He insists that he cannot be outdone. Lisette, stunned, questions if he truly wants her, of all people, to name the great Lord of the Fire Spirits. Her face flushes with panic as Jade watches from behind with a placid, almost amused expression. The villagers murmur amongst themselves, questioning the situation. Overwhelmed, Lisette cries out that this is completely different from her relationship with Jade, whom she had only just met. She vehemently protests the implied intimacy, shouting that they will absolutely not be sharing a bed. His boisterous laughter echoes as he eagerly asks for his new name. While Jade looks on with a hint of irritation, Lizette puts a finger to her chin, deep in thought. After a moment, a name forms in her mind. Leo. She looks up at the powerful spirit, her expression softening into a gentle smile. Addressing him as the Lord of the 100 Beasts, she formally proposes the name she has chosen. Leo. The suggestion hangs in the air. Both the newly named spirit and Jade stare back, their eyes wide with shared surprise. Their surprise quickly melts into acceptance. A wide, pleased smile spreads across Leo's face, and even Jade's expression softens into one of gentle approval. A villager's voice calls out in approval, declaring Leo a fine name. Satisfied, Leo announces that the matter is settled, vowing once more not to be outshone by the king. He then kneels before Lizette, formally addressing her as the Saintess. An elderly man, identifying himself as the village chief, steps forward from the crowd. He explains that he wishes to speak with her on behalf of all the villagers and extend an invitation to his home. Following the chief, the group enters a modest but tidy home. He apologizes for its humble state as he ushers them inside, and Lizette graciously accepts his hospitality. She found herself caught between the two powerful spirits. Leo stepped forward, chiding Jade for his narrow-mindedness and declaring that he and the queen were now inseparable. As Jade scowled, Lizette quickly apologized for the friction between her new companions. Their squabbling was interrupted by the emotional welcome of the village chief and his wife. The elderly couple expressed their disbelief and gratitude, never having imagined a saintess would grace their village. Once they were seated, the chief began to speak, but Leo interjected, his tone somber. He confessed that he had grown to hate humans because he had lost his power and was forced to watch his comrades fall to a monster, leaving him the sole survivor. In response to this painful memory, the village chief bowed his head in a profound apology. He took the blame, admitting that the spirit's waning power was the villagers' fault for failing to truly reclaim what was lost. Lizette looked on, confused, as the chief clarified his statement. It wasn't about forcing people into the royal capital. He insisted it was different, mentioning the name Arcted. The name struck a chord of recognition in her. The chief continued his explanation. The sacred forest, created by the Spirit King and the Saintess, had been destroyed by their ancestors. They burned it to the ground and renamed the barren land Arcted. She struggled to process this revelation. Jade gently reminded her that these events took place more than a century ago, long before her time. The tale transported them back in time, to the court of an ancient king. From his throne, this ruler saw the vast forest not as a sacred place, but as potential farmland to expand his kingdom and his coffers. The sacred pact between the Spirit King and the Saintess had, by then, faded into little more than a children's story. His greed had dire consequences. The forest was set ablaze, and with its destruction, many spirits perished. From the charred remains, an innumerable horde of monsters swarmed forth. Faced with this plague of his own making, the king issued a grim decree. A great barrier was to be raised, and the priests summoned. The Fia Square kingdom was to be sealed off, its borders closed to contain the monstrous threat within. As Lizette stands before them, Jade explains that the pioneers are the ones directly confronting the barrier, the miasma, and the spirits. He notes that many are sacrificed in the struggle. The revelation shocks Lizette, who realizes with horror that people are still fighting the miasma and monsters, and questions if they were simply left behind. He continues, his expression grim, confessing that he himself was at his limit when he declared his rebellion against the King of Men and broke their pact. Hearing this, Lizette covers her mouth, struck by a terrible realization. She was the one who had been obstructing him. Jade turns to her, his voice softening as he apologizes. He explains that at that time, he was possessed by the miasma, just as Leo had been. As Lizette looks up with tears in her eyes, Leo laughs boisterously, joking that she wasn't tainted at all, and that if a saintess were to be tainted, both miasma and filth would cling to her. Jade quickly refutes his jest. Her mind flashes back to a memory of her younger self, embracing Jade in his massive wolf form. She recalls her own voice telling him, "From today, you are Jade. It's a pleasure to meet you, Jade." Returning to the present, she gazes at Jade as he explains that if she had abandoned their pact out of anger, he would have ceased to exist. He tells her she saved him by purifying him. Leo interjects that saving a king possessed by miasma is as good as saving the world, adding that he holds no lingering affection for the king anyway. A warmth spreads through Lizette as she looks between the two spirit lords. With newfound resolve shining in her eyes, she makes a declaration. She will revive the forest of spirits. Her words hang in the air, leaving the village chief stunned and Leo wide-eyed with surprise. He reacts with loud disbelief, questioning if she truly possesses the power to purify the miasma. He insists that he can guarantee it will be impossible if a miasma-spewing monster appears, as they won't be able to gather enough power. Lizette's gaze remains unwavering. She states with conviction that she wants to return this wasteland to the green land it once was, and if this is the place to do it, then she will. Jade's voice was low but resolute as he pledged his full support. His words stunned both Lizette and Leo, who could only stammer in disbelief. The Lord of the Fire Spirits stared, his eyes wide with astonishment at the Spirit King's declaration. Lizette, however, was overcome with a different emotion. A blush spread across her face as she stammered her acceptance. A gentle smile graced Jade's features. He declared it a brilliant, historic idea, and confirmed that he was fully committed to the cause. An elderly villager approached Lizette, his face filled with hope, and pleaded for her to cooperate, offering his home for her to stay. Elsewhere, Leo expressed his shock at how heartily Jade had laughed, a sentiment Lizette shared, realizing she had never seen the Spirit King with such a radiant smile. As night fell, Jade, once again in his massive wolf form, settled down to rest outside the village home, a silent, powerful guardian watching over the new hope that had taken root. A massive white paw rests on the ground as Jade, in his wolf form, lets out a low growl. He considers that he should probably leave in the morning. He continues to ponder, eager to speak with the saintess soon. His thoughts are interrupted as he spots a figure standing in a nearby doorway. It is Lizette, the saintess herself. She steps out into the yard, sighing that it has been a very long day. Though she should be exhausted, her mind is too restless for sleep. A memory surfaces of Jade, in his human form, asking if she could truly sleep alone. She had insisted she would be fine, but now, alone, she thinks his name with a sense of longing. Standing in the profound darkness of the countryside, she reflects on the difference from her past life. In the capital, she muses, the nights were always bright, a stark contrast to the deep, quiet dark that now surrounds her. Her thoughts drift to her purpose. Everything she is doing is to uphold the promise she made to the Great Spirit. The name, Lizette, echoes in her mind, a quiet affirmation of her resolve. A voice from the doorway startles her. It is Jade, now in his human form, holding his coat. He asks what is wrong, correctly guessing that she cannot sleep. Her eyes widen, her expression a mixture of shock and surprise at his sudden appearance. Now standing together outside, she apologizes, worried that she woke him. He gently dismisses her concern, explaining that he was also awake. Elsewhere, the great lion spirit, Leo, stirs irritably. He wonders aloud where Leo is, before realizing he is talking about himself. He grumbles that he was sleeping soundly until the saintess's moodiness woke him up, complaining that she had stepped on him. Unaware of his complaint, Lizette smiles, relieved that he seems to be feeling better. The truth of his condition, however, is grim. His home was stolen, his companion's power was usurped, and he was used by the chief of the fire spirits. The image of the great lion reveals the immense suffering he has endured to reach this state. His voice continued, explaining that just as he was about to be consumed by his hatred for humans, he was saved. Lizette listened, her expression somber, as Jade stood silently beside her. He elaborated that many spirits, not just himself, wish to become demons. When their power is exhausted by the unreasonable demands of humans, they weaken and are swallowed by the miasma that swirls in the demon-infested lands. Lizette absorbed this grim reality, understanding now what was written in the books. She turned to Jade, remarking that she had only heard tales of demons appearing outside the borderlands. Feeling a pang of guilt, she apologized for getting angry earlier. Jade seemed to affirm her understanding, his expression calm. His gaze hardened with resolve. He declared with absolute certainty his intent to transform Arkdead into a magnificent land. If all the demons on the surface could be purified, he reasoned, then humans would no longer need the power to fight them. Upon hearing his declaration, Lizette's expression grew troubled. She looked at the intricate mark on her wrist and asked if, when that time comes, he would erase this proof of their contract. Her eyes filled with tears as she clarified her wish, to end the long history of suffering that the spirits had endured. In response, Jade gently took her hand, causing her to flinch in surprise. He told her softly that what she was asking was something only the Spirit King could do. He closed his eyes, a faint, gentle smile gracing his lips. He then brought her hand to his cheek, the gesture tender and warm. Lizette looked up at him, her heart fluttering. He admitted that he had intended to grant every single one of her wishes. His expression shifted, becoming serious and unwavering. He met her gaze directly and delivered his final answer. That is the one thing I cannot do. He leans in close, gently touching her chin, and explains that while he once thought their contract was unnecessary, his perspective has changed. Flustered by his proximity, Lizette questions his actions, her voice trembling as she says his name. In response, she pushes his hand away, her frustration boiling over. She insists she is being serious and that he shouldn't be joking at a time like this. His expression remains intense as he simply asks if she can see. Her eyes widen, caught off guard by his question. His question is an invitation into a memory, not his own. He explains that he has inherited a fragment of the memories of his predecessor. Through this inherited past, he can feel the profound suffering and lament of the former Spirit King, who was ultimately consumed and transformed into a demon. The memory shows the former king succumbing to terror and despair, believing he was fated to destroy the world. As he spiraled, a young girl, the saintess of that era, approached him. Though he was battered and wounded, she pleaded with the Spirit King to help her exorcise the very evil that was consuming him. Instead of fighting him, the saintess embraced the corrupted king. With a heart full of kindness, she purified the darkness that had taken hold of him. Back in the present, Lizette absorbs the weight of this vision. She asks if the saintess's act returned the demonized Spirit King to his original form. Jade confirms her understanding, adding that all the other spirits were saved as well. He continues, his hand gesturing slightly, revealing that this forgotten history is the true foundation of the Saintess legend. Deeply moved, Lisette closes her eyes and expresses her profound admiration for the previous Saintess. She finds it wonderful that the Spirit King was able to fight alongside his fellow spirits. A gentle smile touches Jade's lips as he remarks that she is just like her predecessor, quietly mentioning Leo's name. He elaborates on his newfound understanding. Witnessing the Saintess purify a demon without a moment's hesitation, the previous king understood why a contract with a mere girl was not a risk, but a necessity. His gaze softens as he looks at Lisette. He declares that if she possesses that same power, then he will never, ever abandon their contract. He firmly believes that spirits and humans must join hands and walk toward the future together. Lisette is left speechless, her face flushing at his profound declaration. Her mind, however, drifts to the nobles who would continue to make unreasonable demands on the spirits. Jade holds her close, reassuring her that she need not worry. Yet, a vision of Solene and the Crown Prince fills her with the familiar fear that her own presence is fading, destined to soon vanish completely. His gentle words are cut short as he notices her troubled expression and asks if she is still worried. Startled by his nearness, her only thought is how incredibly close he is. Suddenly, a sound from the darkness breaks the stillness. Lisette exclaims that something moved, a feeling confirmed by the small spirits flitting nearby. With newfound resolve, she declares that if it's a demon, she must investigate, explaining that she and Leo cannot allow one to appear in the very place they are trying to purify. Jade, however, seems confused by her choice of words. His expression hardens. He remarks that they have talked for too long and suggests they return inside, as a small, fluffy spirit watches from the ground. The following morning dawns bright and clear. Lisette stands amidst the villagers, looking up in wonder at the brilliant blue sky. The villagers murmur in awe, many seeing such a sight for the first time in their lives. One of them compliments her lovely dress, and a blushing Lisette explains that she borrowed it from the village chief's wife, feeling it is almost too beautiful for her to wear. The positive atmosphere is infectious. The spirits happily report that the wind spirits have cleared the miasma, and everyone feels more energetic with the Saintess present. The villagers, having heard the situation from their chief, eagerly offer their assistance in reviving the spirit forest. Their collective hope touches her deeply. With a determined smile, she vows to work hard so they can all live happily. She decides to begin by addressing their most fundamental needs: food, clothing, and shelter. However, the challenges are significant. A villager explains the grim reality. The land is barren. No matter how diligently they work the soil, the harvests are so meager that the area has been called the land of death. She processes this grim information, her mind racing. She understands that even a slight reduction in the miasma will not be enough. They will need specialized knowledge to restore the soil. A new idea forms. Perhaps she should summon the Lord of the Earth. As if summoned by her thoughts, Jade and Leo appear. Jade repeats her question about the Lord of the Earth, while Leo confidently states that the spirit lords would certainly answer her call. Jade gently reminds her of his earlier request to rely on them more, and Leo agrees, noting it has been a long time since he has seen the Earth Lord. She stood silently for a moment, a flicker of doubt crossing her face as she considered the truth. This was something she could not accomplish with her power alone. This realization solidified as she looked upon the hopeful faces of the humans and spirits gathered before her, all waiting for her to act. With renewed resolve, she clasped her hands together, focusing her intent and calling out with her mind to the Lord of the Earth spirits. In an instant, a sprout shot from the barren ground, blossoming into a flower as a massive, fluffy white creature landed with a soft thud. The villagers and Lisette stared in shock as the creature expressed its hope that the Saintess would be pleased with its arrival. The giant rabbit-like spirit sat politely, thanking Lisette for summoning it. She and the villagers could only gape, utterly stunned by its unexpected and adorable appearance. Leo, however, was ecstatic, shouting that the creature was incredibly cute and that he desperately wanted to hug it. He noted how quickly it had arrived, surmising it must have been waiting nearby since the previous night. Her attention drawn by his comment, Lisette turned to Jade, who confirmed that the king had indeed been aware. He then clarified that the strange noise she'd heard the night before was simply crickets. She approached the spirit lord, blushing as she apologized for being bothered by its presence earlier and not addressing it. The creature simply replied that it was fine. It then looked at her gently, explaining that after hearing her story, it had grown quite fond of her. With this, the Lord of the Earth asked if she would be willing to give a name. Lisette's eyes softened, clearly moved by the request. The rabbit spirit gave a happy little hop before vanishing, leaving the promise of its return. She joyfully embraces a stuffed rabbit, a new companion she decides to name Pianchan. As she welcomes her new friend, her party arrives before the Grand Treville ducal mansion in the royal capital, with Jade and Leo looking on. Inside, a long queue of nobles has formed, each bearing gifts. Word spreads through the crowd that they are all here for Lady Solene, who is now being referred to as Saintess Solene. From nearby, Crown Prince Geoffrey affirms this development with a simple, "That's right," his tattooed hand resting calmly at his side. Hearing this, Lisette's expression hardens, her eyes narrowing with a sharp, resolute intensity. Across the room, Solene sits languidly upon a chaise lounge, surrounded by gifts. With Duke Treville standing behind her, she dismissively states that she will only show her face to the waiting nobles if she feels like it. To begin improving the land, it was decided that the Lord of the Earth spirits, affectionately called Pianchan, would first inspect the state of the village's fields. As they arrived, a small village child ran towards them with arms outstretched, joyfully crying out a greeting to the saintess. Lisette smiled warmly, holding the small rabbit-like spirit with Jade at her side. Her smile softened into a look of gentle empathy as she saw flashes of the villagers' happier past, a stark contrast to their current exhausted state. Sensing her shift in mood, Jade quietly asked what was wrong. Petting the Lord of the Earth spirits, Lisette turned to the great wolf and assured him that it was nothing. She then looked out over the barren fields with a serious expression, asking the spirit what his eyes perceived about the state of the village's farmland. The Lord of the Earth spirits conveyed his findings. The soil was well-tilled but far too lean, and as a result, half of the newly planted seedlings had already withered. Lisette considered this, noting that the villagers also seemed worn out. She wondered what could be done, perhaps creating fertilizer or improving irrigation. Her mind drifted to the many days she spent reading in the royal castle, hoping the knowledge would one day be useful. She felt confident she could help. The Lord of the Earth spirits then made a declaration. From now on, the spirits would bestow their blessings upon this land, and the harvest would soon become bountiful. Lisette looked up, her eyes wide with shock. She immediately questioned him, asking if it was truly permissible to use their power for humans, as she had been told it was forbidden. She worried, knowing that the land of Arcted was so tainted with demonic energy that it was difficult for spirits to even reside there, let alone expend their power to help people. The spirit clarified that they only needed to lend their wisdom, and for that, they wished to rely on Lisette. The proposal left her utterly stunned. She remained silent, her eyes wide with disbelief. Jade, the great white wolf, looked up at her and spoke again, his voice gentle. He questioned why she hesitated when her wish was about to be granted, formally asking her to join them in making the land bountiful. He pressed once more, asking her to rely on them. Her silence broke with a soft, warm smile. A light blush dusted her cheeks as she finally spoke, thanking them and asking them to stop being so formal. Her informal reply seemed to startle the spirits. Leo, the Lord of the Fire Spirits, quickly added that he felt the same way. Flustered, Lisette clarified that it wasn't a request, but that she would be happy to do anything for them. Leo then elaborated on their situation, explaining that all the spirits were only able to manifest such power because they were near her. Her presence alone was the source of their strength. The Lord of the Earth spirits agreed, adding that just being by her side made them feel energized. Leo continued, revealing that he had received the purification of her negative emotions. Jade affirmed that it was all true, reassuring Lisette that she was perfect just as she was, and that this was the proof. As she processed this revelation while riding atop Jade, she noticed the small wind spirits fluttering about in a frantic, excited state and asked them what was wrong. The tiny beings were overcome with pure joy, their large eyes shining as they zipped through the air around her. Their happiness was palpable. Lisette closed her eyes for a moment, a serene expression gracing her features as she absorbed the peaceful feeling. One of the spirits explained their excitement to Jade. It realized that if Lisette became their companion, they would understand her wishes instantly, putting her needs before their own. They swarmed around her, joyfully calling her Saintess and expressing their relief that she was well. As she held the Lord of the Earth, her gaze fell upon a ribbon in her hair, her thoughts drifting to her parents. When the spirits asked if she was happy, she quietly affirmed that she was, even though she hadn't known where to find them. She looks up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears of joy, and expresses her profound happiness. To the small spirits gathered around her, she offers her sincere thanks. Her words send the lesser spirits into a frenzy of celebration, cheering and zipping through the air with delight. Their joyous noise is cut short by a thunderous roar from a massive, lion-like spirit. He bellows at them for being too loud, warning them that his ears are ringing. Beside him, the large, rabbit-like Lord of the Earth spirits quietly adds that they shouldn't tell Leo about this. Startled by the commotion, she turns her head, Jade the wolf at her side. The Lord of the Earth spirits, now nestled in her arms, seems to tell her, "See? I told you so." A realization dawns on her as she looks towards the powerful spirits. She understands that her joy is the very source of their power, and using that power for her sake is their greatest happiness. She quietly processes this profound connection, whispering the words to herself, "My joy is their power." Sometime later, she speaks with the village elder, who seems distressed. He asks if the Saintess's parents, the Louviers, are known to her. The question stuns her. A memory surfaces of being left behind 14 years ago. The elder explains that her parents, after abandoning her to the Duke, now reside in the nearest border village. Nearby, Jade and Leo discuss this revelation. Jade is surprised that Lisette was also cast out, while Leo fumes, questioning if they should punish her parents. He notes that their origins were never investigated, calling it a foolish oversight. Lisette interrupts, stating that just knowing her parents are alive is enough for now. She has a more pressing concern, her parents' village. Her expression firms with resolve. She declares that to rebuild the village quickly, she intends to borrow the power of the Lord of the Earth Spirits. She holds the Lord of the Earth Spirits, asking for his help, but cautioning him not to overexert himself. The spirit readily agrees. With the pact made, she raises his paw, preparing to channel the blessing. In response, a wave of brilliant energy washes over the fields. The villagers, including her parents, stand in stunned silence as she bestows a blessing of the spirits upon their land. The miraculous sight overwhelms the onlookers. Her parents, with tears streaming down their faces, can hardly believe what they are seeing. They reflect on their long years of hardship under a sunless sky and offer their heartfelt thanks for this impossible gift. This miracle galvanizes the villagers into action. A man rallies the others, shouting that it's time to harvest. The Lord of the Earth Spirits, floating nearby, eagerly offers to help as well. But one of the men steps forward, his expression determined. He insists that this is something they must do with their own hands, declaring that his arms are itching for the work. Watching their renewed spirit, Lisette is deeply moved. She observes how alive everyone has become, realizing that the harvest is the true joy of this kind of labor. She turns to her companions with a bright smile, suggesting that Jade and Leo join the harvest as well. Jade seems taken aback, questioning if she even knows how to do such work. Lisette cheerfully admits her ignorance, but explains that she feels an undeniable urge to help. Her enthusiasm does not go unnoticed. A villager calls out in surprise, asking if the saintess is truly going to perform farm labor. He muses on how beautiful the world is, where one person's joy can become the power that moves everything. Nearby, Leo and Jade observe the scene unfolding. Leo chuckles, a wide grin on his face, while Jade watches with a gentle, closed-eye smile. In the end, Leo begins. This is how it turns out, he concludes, as Lisette works happily in the field alongside her parents and the other villagers. Together, they complete the harvest and sow the seeds for the next crop, their collective effort resulting in a bountiful success. She beams, thanking Jade for his help and proudly declaring that she did a good job. He looks at her with a gentle expression, telling her not to push herself too hard and that she can keep the vegetables she gathered. Her eyes widen in surprise at his offer. Overcome with emotion, she throws her head back and laughs, her face a portrait of pure bliss. She exclaims that she is having so much fun and feels truly happy from the bottom of her heart. Watching her unrestrained joy, Jade can only look on, a soft, understanding expression on his face as he quietly acknowledges her happiness. The tender moment is abruptly broken by the arrival of Leo, the Lord of the Fire Spirits. Lisette and Jade turn in surprise as he steps forward with a confident smirk. "Leo," she cries out, startled. He looks down at them, a hand on his hip, and asks with a theatrical air if it is now his turn to act.